Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we're jumping into another offering from Firestone Walker. This is a 2016 release, so a 5-year-old beer. The specific one is Helldorado. It is a blonde barley wine that clocks in at 11.8% ABV. It is barrel aged, I know, in oak, and I know it's some kind of reused spirit barrel, though despite my best efforts in research, being that it doesn't state specifically on the label, I don't know exactly what spirit. I might get a sense when we get this cracked open. Nonetheless, Firestone Walker, based in Paso Robles, California. This is probably getting near 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in that range, 9 to 12 different beers I've had from Firestone in the last year since I've finally been able to get them on Tavour. And this is one I set aside. I've specifically been saving and decided today's the day that I wanted to jump in and see what this barley wine is all about. So it's got a little foil tab pull, so we're going to get that cleared first. And it's just capped, no cork. As always, just a super clean label design from Firestone. It's got their name and their label, and they tell you all sorts of interesting information. Like this is a British ale house yeast. It's got an 11 SRM on the color spectrum, a whopping 24 IBUs, gives you the gravity, how many cases they produce, the full 9 yards. So Firestone Walker really, along with Drecker, is one of the best in the business for giving kind of the beer nerd side of data that most average people just don't care about. But I do, and I think it's awesome that they tell you about it. So without further ado, we're going to get this cracked gently. 5 years old, and it still has a nice crack and pop. So let's get this poured right in the glass. Oh yeah, that's lovely. That is a blonde barley wine if ever I saw one. I've had a few now. This is not the norm. Normally barley wines are made with some amber and caramel malts, some darker malt blends, which is why they tend to be that kind of caramely color. You can also have black barley wines. But blonde, this is the second or third I've had. Looks a lot more akin to a wheat wine or an oat wine, but it looks absolutely great. I can tell you, as expected from any barley wine, you can smell it from a great distance away. I'm smelling some maltiness, I'm smelling some barrel, though I can't quite pick out exactly what it is. First thing first, let's take a peek at it. Visually, yeah, that's a beautiful looking beer. That is a true blonde barley wine, exactly as advertised. Head did a pretty decent job. It's got a little bit of creaminess sitting on top, just a little pad that's going to float. Barley wines, just due to their ABV and how wild the yeast go, sure, it'll create some carbonation, but they tend to not be the most effervescent styles as a rule. Some really, really are, but most are really, really not. So yeah, it formed ahead, did fine. For what it is, good job. Let's jump right over for a proper sniff. Okay, I can tell there's a barrel involved here, and I know that it's oak, so my bet would be it's either going to be bourbon or it's going to be whiskey. One of the two. And obviously bourbon is bourbon whiskey, very specific things that go into what creates bourbon, but I don't know definitively. Maybe when I jump in and have a sip, I'll be able to tell a little more clearly, but I can tell you that's kind of the barrel vibe I'm getting off of this. And it does smell very much with overtones of your typical barley wine aroma. So there's figs, there's plums, there's raisins. They're all coming out very strongly mixed with that barrel that I don't know what it is, but it smells really, really nice. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in. Oh, that's so nice. So nice. Big flavor. Very barley wine in the flavors coming through, but I think that 5 years of just setting there has really mellowed it out, taken some of the edge off. So it's not got anywhere near as large of a boozy kick as you would normally associate with a barley wine. Still is a big beer. It's got good breadth to it. And it's got an intensity of flavor to it. It's just dialed back a bit on the heat, and if you want to call it harshness, whatever, that's fine. That's actually one of the aspects personally I enjoy about higher ABV beers, but to each their own. I understand it's not for everybody. This is coming from the guy that drinks his scotch neat, and younger scotches, which are less refined, a little more burny, a little more bitey. I like that. When I'm drinking something with higher ABV, I want to know, yeah, I'm drinking that. So this, to me, really nice, very mellow. In terms of what I'm getting from the barrel on this, it's very clear that there is some barrel, but I can't even pinpoint what it is. There are obviously a lot of caramel and toffee and vanilla undertones here, which could be pointing to a bourbon or a whiskey barrel, but that's also intrinsic flavors that come through in a barley wine. So I don't really know. I'm going to do some further research. If I do pinpoint what it is, I'll make sure to link it down in the comments on the review. If by some miracle Firestone happens to watch this, maybe they can comment and let me know what barrel they used for their 2016 Helldorado. I am very curious. I like to know about what I'm consuming, but what I can tell you is it's absolutely fantastic. So there's a lot happening here. As with any barley wine, it's a long, multi-hour sipping beer style. This is no exception, and it's very, very complex with layer after layer after layer that you really have to dig through. So 100%, I'm going to have to jump back in here for another sip. So we're going to do exactly that. I'm going to think specifically on body and mouthfeel first, and then start to think on the flavor layering and the finish. Body on this is a nice, full, medium heavy. Exactly what you'd expect for the barley wine. Mouthfeel, very much the same thing. It's got a nice bit of resistance. It's not syrupy, but it's very resistant. And when you agitate around the palate, it doesn't cream up, it doesn't get silky, it doesn't get foamy or velvety. It's just, you can really feel that resistance, and there's just a slight bit of carbonation you can feel on the palate. So that's exactly where I expected it to be. On the front, there is this discernible barrel note mixing with the underlying barley wine. So let's talk about the actual barley wine itself first. On this one, maybe it's due to age, I don't know, but I'm getting some interesting, more citrus-like fruit that are coming through in the tones. So there's definitely plum, raisin, apricot, and it almost borders on like a pear. Kind of, it's juicy, it's not apple, but it's a little richer than apricot. A little lighter, rather, more leaning towards kind of a sweeter profile. So I think it's kind of a pear-like quality, but there are these bright, zesty notes. And I don't want to say it tastes like biting into the flesh of, say, an apple, an orange, a lime, a lemon, but it's almost like somebody taking a microplane and very finely just a little bit of zest for a little bit of zing. And it's got this slight acidity to it. And that's really what's kind of binding to that kind of bright, floral, citrus-like quality I'm getting on the back end. And again, I'm going to reiterate, the dominant characteristics here are prototypical barley wine. So we're talking very rich, very indulgent. It's got a lot more forward profile of plum, raisin, apricot, toffee, caramel. There's almost this buttery sense about it too. Slight kind of estery bits that are throwing in some kind of popcorn flavors in the background, but it's kind of all in here. It's very much a prototypical, well-crafted barley wine in the sense of its multi-layered complexity. What, for me, is different in this than the vast majority of barley wines I take is just that this is a 5-year-old beer now. Still tastes as fresh as I'm sure the day it was bottled. It's just mellowed out a bit. So yeah, you get a little bit of a booziness to it and a slight little alcohol-like flavor, but on this one it truly is very, very slight. And there's still a nice warming sensation, but it doesn't have quite the same intensity you typically associate with a barley wine. But it's a very, very nice beer, very well put together. That much is crystal clear and very enjoyable to drink. In terms of the finish, this one I would say is maybe slightly above average. And really, I think the aging has just mellowed it out to the point that the absolute astringency of the ingredient profile and prevalence is just dialed back a bit, just like the inherent warmth and kind of boozy kick on it. it's dialed back a bit. Same thing with the barrel. Whatever they aged it in, it's definitely present, but it's not so in your face that it's really pushing. So it's really average-ish, maybe high end of average, but it's not, you know, what you would typically expect from, hey, I'm drinking in the year it was made barley wine that was barrel aged. But very, very nice. Make no mistake, very, very nice. I am absolutely a big fan of this one. It's delicious. It's got a lot of layers of complexity, some interesting new flavors I don't normally associate with the barley wine or get in them. And overall, I'm a big fan. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, come up with my scores. When I come back, I will get this one ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy this beer, we're going to get it ranked. Again, this is Firestone Walker's Helldorado 2016 release, a blonde barley wine that's been barrel aged, clocking in at 11.8% ABV. Firestone Walker is based in Paso Robles, California. So starting with the aroma. The aroma, as per typical with a barley wine, this was pungent, a pungent beer. They're big, bold beers, both in aroma and in flavor. This one maybe not quite as intense as some, and you know, I talked about how it seemed like over time, the 2016 release, it did mellow a bit, took off some of that edge, but it still smelled really nice, had a lot of layers of complexity, and overall significantly higher than average pungency on the nose. Aroma did get a 9 out of 10. For the taste, I absolutely loved it. Sure, with big ABV beers, be they barley wines or imperial stouts, or whatever they may be, barrel-aged or otherwise, I do like that nice warming sensation. I like a little bit of a boozy kick, lets you know you're drinking a higher ABV beer. This one still had a nice warming sensation, though that edge was definitely off. And indeed, as tasty as it was and as big and bold as it was, compared to other barley wines, it didn't have quite that same punch, but it did have a lot of different layers of subtlety and a lot of interesting twists and turns, as well as the classic flavor profile. But overall, I thought it was very well done and an excellent barley wine indeed. The taste, I did give a perfect 10 out of 10. For the body, time took nothing away from the body. It's a big, bold beer style, nice and weighty. This was no different. Body does get a 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel on this one was pretty much your prototypical barley wine. I mean, it's just what they are. Some of them are a little lighter, some are significantly heavier. This was on the higher end of the upper echelon for the body and the mouthfeel. It had a good bit of resistance to it, had a nice little bit of carbonation in there. You never really know what you're going to get in terms of carbonation activity on the palate. Mouthfeel does get a 10 out of 10. For the finish, this was a category that kind of surprised me a bit. Big, bold, pungent aromas and flavors, but really, I think where the time did a little disservice on this beer was probably in the finish more than anything else. It was really just high end of average. You know, compared to other beer styles, way longer than average, but compared to other barley wines, this was really just an average barley wine. Nice pungent flavors, but they really didn't have that length to push it out. Finish does get a 6 out of 10. For the head and retention, this one did a very good job. It was above average. Barley wines, and again, it's another style you never really know what you're going to get, but this one did a good job, and it formed and held a head certainly above average, and the score reflects that. It does get a 7 out of 10. For the appearance, this is a blonde barley wine, exactly as advertised. Appearance does get a 10 out of 10. For the balance, overall, the balance of flavors in this were fantastic. The base malts, the yeast, everything paired together. The barrel, even though I don't know precisely what it was, I got some kind of flavor suggestions that kind of steered me in a couple of different possible directions. But at day's end, the balance was really great. Not only between the yeast and the malt bill, but also with the barrels that they chose. Balance does get a perfect 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. Subjectively, I absolutely loved it. Look, it would have to be a pretty ho-hum barley wine for me to subjectively not really love the beer. I mean, it's my favorite beer style, and this was exceptionally well done. Subjectively, feeling intangible does get a 10 out of 10. which brings us to an example of the style. So as a barley wine, a very nice barley wine. As a blonde barley wine, a very nice blonde barley wine. So there's a slight subcategorization here, but in the grand scheme of things, typical Firestone Walker, they did a fantastic job. And maybe some people will like a little more mellow that the 5-year time in the bottle does give it. You know, it's got a little something for everybody, but it's still a barley wine at its heart. Example of the style, I did give a perfect 10 out of 10, which brings the total score on Firestone Walker's Helldorado 2016 release to a 92 out of 100. So here we are, another Firestone, another well above average beer. Barley wine fans, this is just another one to seek. I don't know how readily you could find the 2016, but I imagine that maybe a bit easier to find some of the more recent releases, but well worth your time if you're a fan of barley wines, barrel-aged beers, or blonde barley wines specifically. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, just turn on the notifications, hit that bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.